Oh, good evening, all of you learners. We start about these principles of programming language. Last lecture we discussed about all the procedure we follow, kind of conditional statement and some of the code. So today we learn about the program. Program means any code we write in our any compiler, any programming languages which form some kind of some processor that be written in any format. So when we write any code, we need some kind of processor, some kind of syntax, some kind of semantic for that languages. But some of that code, that processor are repeatedly followed. So we need to rewrite that program, and this program is called as subprogram. So we learn this session about the subprogram and how these subprogram are written, how these subprogram are executable, and some other features of these. So, firstly, we learn about subprogram, what is subprogram, and what the use in programming of that subprogram, and the procedure we follow for creating this subprogram in our programming, and how these procedures are using and the functions. Functions is the only way to create these subprogramming. And these are functions also called simple functions and recursive. Recursive means we write a code, but that follow by there are two ways to follow any procedure, top to down. But in recursive function, we follow the bottom to top down procedure to call a function, call some values we require for the program. And after this declaration and all these calling functions, we learn this session. So after these points, when we complete, we know about what type of subprogram and these use, all these kind of scenario we will learn in this session. So we start about the introduction of these subprogram. Subprogram are a fundamental building block. So this is not any kind of building block, but it is a line code. It is a code which is formed by another code and we use in another part of that programming. Like when we write a simple C program for printing hello world, but when we inputting many type of these statement in our programming languages, so we require to follow some kind of subprogram procedure. So subprogram are a fundamental building block of programming, allowing us to modularize code and reuse it in various parts of the program. So it means when we write a program and when we reuse these programs, so we write another program for that. So these small programs we are including our whole program, and these small program called as subprogram or across multiple programs. Subprogram can be defined as a function, procedure, or method. So this is subprogram. It not just any term. It may be differ many times like functions, many times like procedure, many times like methods. So we contribute these subprogram in many ways. Like we use in some languages as a function for subprogram, as a procedures for subprogram like SQL, SQL languages. We follow some procedure. So the method are another part of type of function, each with its own unique characteristics. So that means in every processor, there are some type of these program written in our programming to solve our purpose, which is required many time in a program so that we need to write some program for that code. When is subprogram is called? Called means when we write many code in one program, but we want to execute these subprogram, so we need to call them. So we need to follow some kind of method, some kind of procedure, some kind of functions in our main function. Everybody you write a C program like we start from include has studio.s followed by we use main function. Then we use some functions. In main function, we write subprograms calling feature that is invoked when we execute that subprogram. So it goes through a process like called as activation. Activation is nothing but just compilation of that subprogram, which involve allocating memory space. So that time we call these subprograms. So that means we require to allocate some memory part for their data types, their variables. So moreover, these variables require some memory and some execution environment. So that we invoke means we included subprogram part in our main function in C. There are some other features in C++, some other features in Java too. So it is differ from many other languages. But in C, we just write main function and we use subprograms, methods, processor function in that main function and we call them. Subprogram can be used Subprogram can be used to implement important programming concepts such as abstractions. So you learn about abstraction or not, I don't know, but abstraction is a features in every programming language in which we just show our only some part of that program, but hide another main programs. Like we just telling about this is a principle of programming languages, but we don't say yeah, don't in visual visible our main code for that program. So abstraction is a feature of any programming language. Encapsulations, like we know about the medical capsule. So capsule is that type of object, but in that object we don't know what is there. So encapsulation is also features like we complete our many function in one function, we transfer that one form to another form. There are another feature is more polymorphism. It is also a object oriented programming feature where we use some features of many types, like but we use overloading type features. We use same type of operator in many ways. So these as a method overloading, function overloading, operator overloading, these are the polymorphism features. So these large scale software system when we develop, so that we need to many kind of subprogram included in our library. So if our code is in very large form, means we build some kind of big building like big software, big website. So we required some small part included in our main objective. There are some other features which include recursive. Recursive subprogram or subprogram that call themselves within their own definition, which mean when we call itself, means when we just call ourselves, it's called a recursive method. Just we write a code and we call many times that code. These are the features of recursive. So these definitions are on definitions. They define on their self, their calling feature, their subprograms. These methods allow us a more complex and powerful set of operations, such as traversing. Traversing means if we build a tree-like methodology, like we have numbers from top to bottom, but like tree method. So when we traverse these numbers one by one leaf and another leaf, so we require traversing. These called the traversing. In data structure, you all learn about the traversing features. We also know about the graphs. Graphs, trees are unstructured way of data types. But when we learn these features in data structure, we required recursive method of subprograms. So a subprogram is a series of statements that perform a specific task in a program. So already I said these small statements, like these statements, series of statements are included in a program which called a subprogram. Subprogram are the most important concept in programming language design. Two fundamental abstraction facilities can be included in programming languages. One is process abstraction, means we don't define our which process is compiled first, which process is compiled second. So this feature, this hidden scenario of this feature is called a abstractions. Abstraction means when we write a abstract for any research paper, any book, so we only include the main part of that, but we don't define the actual internal part of that. So abstraction also achieved by these subprograms, and data abstraction also ab- achieved through the abstraction. So if subprogram can be called within another processor, every C program. So in C programming language, at least we required one function. So when we write main, we required a function scenario, open bracket and close bracket. This code define main as a function. So we before this slide we learned when we start these method we require some processor, some method, some function. So only one at least one function all the programming languages required for execution that program. A program can be divided up into separate functions. A function declaration tells the compiler about a function name return means if we provide any value to this function. If we provide integer a, so that means we provide the subprogram feature including in this method, and we are calling by the value means if we have value in these brackets, that means this function is called as a value, call by value. So after this topics, we learn about call by value, call by reference. These are the features of any function. So first we write any function name for the subprogram. Then we define if we require return type, if we require some other parameters. So we fulfill that first, then we write a function definition provide the actual body of the function. The C, so when we start to write a code for some of any our requirement, so we define like there is we define main function, so that we require to write some function in our code. We just type some and open bracket and close bracket. When we write this like sum, then they call the sum part means whenever we use some function and all these data types, all the required field of this, so they call in the main function. So the C standard library provide numerous built-in functions that your program can call. A function is known with various names like a method. So also you remember there is no some type of other differences in a method, in a function, in a subroutine. These are the all procedures are same, but their usage in different programming languages are different. So if we follow any processor, that means it is also a function. It is also maybe a method. So a subprogram, when we need to know about the what is subprogram. Subprogram is a part of a program that perform one or more related tasks. Another, it is his own name, then written as an independent part of program. When just we write in void main and int main, or we just write some kind of language, written sentences. But when we describe our method in secondary part, we just start with some function, and in that we define our variable like integer, float. So that may be differ from that. So you all write in C programming or learning in C programming. So that part of that program is called a subprogram. Why we use these subprogram in our programming? So that help us to define our logical section in several way. Means the smaller programs routine make programming, debugging, and subsequent maintenance easier. When we write our subjective answer in our exams, so we define by the top level and bottom level, like we just hint out the main technical part, we just follow a small paragraph and then we write. So that means if examiner check these copies, so it is clear to check out what is the procedure, what is the way you are writing, and what the kind of we need to know where is your correct answer and where you use some kind of technical word, so that clearly checked. So when we use a program in our programming, that means if we made any mistake, so we clearly find the debugging part. They also help us in coding repeated operations, like we need to write more program in same kind of structure, more programs, more sentences in same types of use. But that uses, yeah, differ from that in very similar way. So that we write a subprogram for that. Like we just include some programming, like we just want to calculate the sum, calculate the average, calculate the percentage. So there are some variables are same, but the processor, the logical part is maybe different. So that clear lens, that clarity we include on programming, so that we define in each processor in sub programs. Processor used in one program can act a building block for another program or other program with slight modification. So we can use code reuse. Programmer working on large project can divide the workload by making different functions. When we use these kind of programming, these kind of processor in our way, so that may be benefited each and every member of that code. When we have a major project, we start to write a project where we use many type of languages, many type of processor. So there are one team, but the team has on that different part, like some of them are programming, some of them are testing purpose, some of them are document purpose. So we describe them on the basis of their ability. When we use kind of these things, clarity in our programming, we just write code, we define each code in each section with the help of their technology. So that means it clear. After what the parameters of any subprograms, subprogram usually describe computations. Why we need subprograms? To compute our programming in easier way. There are two ways a program can gain access to the data. That is the process through direct access to non-local variable. There are two types of variables. One is global variable. Second is then local variables. The global variable is that which define, which be accessible for all kind of subprogram. But when we define our variable in a subprogram, that means that subprogram part only use these kind of variables. Data passed through the parameter access through name. Data are local to the subprogram. Parameter passing. Parameter means just we write a function like sum, open bracket, close bracket. This called as a parenthesis. Means when we put any value in the open bracket and close bracket, these define that function's parameters. The parameters in some program header are called formal parameter. Subprogram call statement must include the name of subprogram, a list of parameter to be bound to the formal parameter of the subprograms. These parameters are called actual parameters. The binding means when we combine all these processes, all these parameters in one, these two formal parameter is done by the simple position. The first actual parameter is bound to the first formal parameter. So for such parameter are called positional parameter. It is not required by the just remember all the things. Just know about how the our programming are actually describes. So there are subroutines, there are sub-processor, there are some methods. When we write in any code in any language, just you need to know. Just we create a function for that languages. That means it is a subprogram for this program. So subprograms are complex structure in programming languages and overloaded. Overloaded means if our subprogram is one that has the same name as another program is called same referencing environment. Maybe it's happened with our same code. A generic subprogram is one whose computation can be done on data of different type of different code. Local referencing and global referencing. And Non-local. Subprograms are generally allowed to define their own variables thereby. Own variables means when we write subprogram, so that means we just define our variables which are used in that code. But when we use all kind of the variables before writing the code, so we defining local referencing environment first. Variables that are defined inside subprogram are called local variables. Local variables is not accessed by any other method or in writing in that code. So local variables, because access to them is usually restricted. Matlab, it is only used by these building block of these subprograms to the subprogram in which they are defined. If we define any variable in subprograms, that means this variable called as a local variable. If we write this variable above the main function after the include has the preprocessor part, so that variables are used in any subprograms below our programming. But if we write any variables in our subprograms, that means is only locally available. Like there are some public part, there are some private part. So if you on your car, that means that is your local vehicle. But you when you use public transport, that means it's a public part. Anybody can use. If local variable are stack dynamic, they are bound to storage when the subprogram begins. Execution and unbound from storage. Both that execution terminate and advantage of it. This is all the definition of how the program is accessed. When you write in C, so you just know about how these are processes are. So their definitions are writing here. It is important that recursive subprogram have stack dynamic lookup. You all know what is stack, what is queue. Queue means when we in any queue, that means one way to enter and another way to no, only one way to exit. But in stack, when you put books in a rack, so that means last in and last out. When you do, these are kind of way to thinking the subprograms recursive method. Main disadvantage of strict dynamic local variables, cost of the time required to allocate, initialize, and deallocate for activation. So when we write some line of code, some thousand of line of code, but we require to execute, we when compile. So that means when compile means the recursive function followed by bottom to top, like stack. When we put some book in rec means we just follow the stack procedure. We put books one by one, and if we want to access this book, so we just outing from the last in. So last in is the procedure. So it is time required in any program which required more time. That means the time complexity is measured. So if we build any kind of software, any kind of application, any type of kind of applications, we just follow which best feature that requires less memory and less time to execute. Access of state dynamic local variable must be indirect, where accesses to static can be direct. State dynamic local variables, the subprogram cannot retain data value of the local variable between calls. Calls means when we start the method by calling. Calling means we initializing the each subprogram is a single entry point. There is only one subprogram execution at any given time. So when we compile, when we need to know if we require to access any subprogram, so there is only single entry point. Entry point means single processor to top to down or bottom to up. So that is programming. We just follow that programming line by sentence by sentence, processor by processor. So only one execution part may happen once. Subprogram definition describes the interface to end the action of subprogram abstraction. A subprogram call is explicit. We already discussed about explicit means it is have their definition with itself. Request that the subprogram is executed. Two fundamental kind of subprogram are procedure or functions. So these are the fundamental kinds. We just differ these subprogram in procedure or function. Just a second. The parameter profile for a subprogram is the number, order, and type of its formal parameter. The protocol the protocol of a subprogram. We already discussed about what is protocol. Protocol is just a rule, like rules and regulation, which are followed further these programs. So if we use if subprograms, that means there are some procedure for that subprogram. So these parameter profile plus a function it return types are defined in itself. Subprogram declaration are common in C programs which are called by prototype. So the subprogram have their kinds way to define. One is procedure and second is function. Procedure are the collection of statement. So procedure also the same as a function. Functions also have some kind of statement, collection of statement. So procedure are collections of statement. They define parameterized computations. They define parameterized constructions computations. These computations are enacted by single call statement. Procedure define new statements. Procedure only define new statements. Functions structurally resemble procedure but are semantically. Semantically means there are some kind of fixed procedure, fixed way, fixed rules to define this. This is modeled on mathematical function. Functions are called by appearances of their name in expressions. So when we write any function, we just define that name. That appearances means their name, and we just follow some expressions. If we follow in function mathematical function, so some expressions also included in the that along with the required actual parameter means when we use any variable in the that method that functions, the value produced by a function execution is returned to the calling code, replacing the code itself. When just inputting any process and we have returned some value, so the returning way of that calling code is replacing the call itself, that defined by the recursive method, which we learn in next slide. So how a function is defined? So the general form a function defines return type means we just write integer if our value. If we don't want any return type, so we just type void. Void means we have no any value in return format when the output is generated. So that means the value of these processes are if we write here integer, so that means that all these parameters when followed, so when procedures are followed, then the return value also be integer. So we define what is the type of that function, so that we write on that. We generally use main function, and we write main function as a void function. That means we don't generate any return type. But if we required, we just write here. If you require integer, float, just characters, so any functions to output we want in our result, we write here. Then function name, like I just write here some function as you have. Then we open these parentheses in the parameter list. Parameter list, our definition, we just inputting ever in these bracket integer a. A is a variable type of integer. When the whole program is compiled, whole program is executed, then the value of that function, if we follow these body function, so wherever we required a, that means we want the value in that function. we just write function name one time here, we just write function second time here, third time here, fourth time here. We just reuse these processor. So these processor are followed by the all these type of, so return type we define all these here. A function may return a value, so that means when we compile this function there are some parameters, some rules, some expressions, some mathematical equations, so they found from this body part means it is actual for code for this function. We require some means we have three variables, integer a, integer b, integer c. The value of integer a, when we inputting in dynamic way, just inputting 5, 2 and 3, there are three numbers, but we want to compile these as some function. Some functions require the processor just call this function, and the value of this 5 to 7 means there may be 10, 12 job they the output we generate. It is integer type. So return type may get a value, return a value. The return value is a data type of the value, the function return. Some function perform the desired operation without returning a value. In this case, the return type is the keyword void. So if we don't require any return value, that time there is no value, and we just follow the structure. So whenever we don't want any return value, just write void. After that, we write a function. So this is the actual name of that function. If we write our name as a function, it may be work. There is no problem. You choose what of your function name. The function name and the parameter list is together constitute the function signature. So these total part with the parameter and function name called as a function signature. After, what is the parameter? So you just know what is the parameter may be or not. So parameter is like a placeholder means when we just inputting, when we write sign up in any like Gmail, we write in, we create account on the Gmail, there are some columns, some text books over there, but in the text book we just required pre pre-filled some entries like enter your name, just we write type our name. So that means these are the placeholder for that. So parameter, when a function is invoked means when function called, when function is remembered to for a execution part. So that means you pass a value means you just input any value like integer 5, integer a, that may be required by that function, like formal parameter. This value is referred to as actual parameter or argument. The parameter list refer to the type, order and number of parameter of that function. Parameter are optional, that is a function may be contain no parameter. It is not required always. When we need to use, you use, otherwise you just blank it. Then the body part of that function. The function body contain a collection of statements. They define what function does. So we write actual code for that function in the body of that function. Like we just start here. Okay. So we have an example. We find maximum number in these two numbers. So we use data type, return type integer, we write the function name max, and we follow some parameters. There are two parameters, two values. These are called by the max function. One is number one, second is number two. If we have 5 and 2 there, then the processor follow by maximum number. A function declaration tells the compiler what a function name and how to call the function. The actual body of the function can be defined separately. A function declaration is the on part, following part, return type and function name or parameter. This is an example. Parameter name are not imported in function declaration. If we not write in here, so that means we our function okay. It's not about that key. If we not fill these parameters, so that means our function is not accurate. If we require, we fill. If we not required, we don't write in our programming. only their type is required, so the following also valid. If we just follow integer max and just int one, int only int in two times, which means the return value of this number also work. Function declaration is required when you define a function in one source file and you call that function in another file. In such case, you just declare the function at top of the file calling function. That means if we write this int function in our main, and after that we write code int main and its body part on the subprogram. But we want this code in many times. So that means if we just follow this function, this method in top of the file. So what is the procedure to calling these function, these methods? While creating a C function, you give a definition of what the function has to do. To use a function, you will have to call that function to perform the defined task. If we write this code in our program, but it's not a main function part, so it is not required to compile. It is not needed to run. If we want to run this code, we just initiate this function before the integer. So that means we write a method int sum. This is a C method, C programming languages method. So where we write integer sum, integer number one and integer number two to find the sum of these two numbers. Then we write main function and there we declare our values of a equal to 5, values of b equal to 7. And we want result. Result is assigned to some a or b. Just the procedure follow integer, they are allocating variables space in store memory 5 and 7. After that, we start the value of result, but the value of result is called by the function. Then which function? Which one is it? Sum a and b, and this is right here. It is called subprogram of that main program. When just call this function, but actual code are there. Just finding the result. Result means sum of a and b, but this is not excluded explicit here, not declared here. It is function code. Function code. Then the function is called, and the all these details integer result equal to num1 plus num2. The value of number 1 and number 2 are calculated, then it's assigned to the result variable, and the variable what result is returned. These are the filled by. After that, firstly some calling function or called, then these part of compilation is complete. After that, we put our printer function, and there we want to print the value of a and b and result. So all these processes to follow for calling any function in any programming. After that, there are two type of subprogram. One which one is simple and another which is recursive. Simple means we just follow one by one line procedure. That means is it is a simple program, simple subprogram. Like previous one, we we are writing a code, but it is this is method done by bottom to top. Means there are code in another section, there are code in another section, we just complete this section, then we get a return value, then we follow. So this is the recursive type method. A recursive subprogram is one that call itself. Means when we initializing a method and we call itself. Think of a recursive call as a call to some other subprogram that does not same task as your subprogram. Each recursive call creates a new instance of any object declared in the subprogram, including parameters, variables, cursors, and exceptions. So we also learn about what the exception. Exception means we know what kind of error may be occurring in our programming, and we write a code for that are called as an exception. And we handle these kind of exception, errors, bugs by the handling of their exception. Likewise, new instance of the SQL statement are created. SQL here is a database related language. So when we learn about DBMS database management system, there we will learn about SQL languages are created at each level in the recursive design. There must be at least two paths through a recursive subprogram, one that leads to the recursive code and one that does not. That is, the least one path must lead to a terminated condition, otherwise the recursive would go on forever, means always are. Okay. Few point to remember about the recursion. Recursion is a programming technique. So it is not suited by every programmer. Some of programmer are using simple subprogram, but some of that are using recursive subprograms. So what is the key differences between the when we use recursion? Recursion is programming technique in which function call. Function call means when we write any function and we just initiate these functions feature. So we call that function. It if the function is called by itself, that means it is a recursion. So, if function call itself repeatedly to solve a problem by breaking it down into smaller subprograms. When a function calls itself within its own code, it is said to be recursive. If any function we create its call self features, these are the kind of recursive. In recursive, the function may have one or more base cases. They determine when the recursion should stop and the function should return a value. The base case provides a termination condition that stops the function from calling itself. The recursion process works by the breaking down a complex problem into the smaller, simpler problem and then solving each of these subprograms. So these are the definition of these recursive method. When we use, we need to know about these points, but you don't require. When you implement all kind of this program in your program, so you easily learn about these are the definition for any programming languages. When we write a code, we access that code, we write that method, so we just simply know about the what is the recursion. Recursion means when a function call itself, that's all. So, what is the advantage of these recursion in our programming? The code may be easier. Easier means when we put our code in breaking in smaller part, they are taking it's calling itself when we rewrite same kind of code. So that part may be easy to write. To solve such problem which are naturally recursive, such as Tower of Hanoi. If you know about any a problem about Tower of Hanoi means we have a big problem, but we start by one processor to solve this processor. If we required bottom to top approach or top to bottom approach, so we follow some kind of naturally recursive method to complete these kind of problems. Reduce unnecessary calling of function. It is also help us to reduce. Reduce means we just know calling any time any function but just when we required. So if necessary, then it's calling, otherwise not call that function. Extremely useful when applying the same solution. Recursive reduce the length of code. Okay, it also help us to less less statement writing for our code. We just write many code and just put our function itself and calling that function. So that means we don't require many part for a body part for that function. Stack evolution and infix, prefix and postfix we precedence when we follow. So these are the evolution. You also learn in our programming like prefix when we solve these kind of problem with the help of prefix, postfix and infix. Just to know what is recursion, what recursion help us to do any programming, any complex solutions, and what is the disadvantages for that. Recursive functions are generally slower than non-recursive functions. It means when we write a code with the help of recursive functions, which means when we write any code, but we write with the help of recursive, that means the time for consuming for these functions are much larger than a simple processor. It may require a lot of memory space to hold intermediate result on the system state. When we compile these functions, so we require some immediate solution for the memory. So it's also required a lot of memory, hard to analyze or understand the code. So the recursive method is complex structure method. So just we write any recursive method, so we also known about all the features, all the kind of way it is using, so it need properly, it is not more efficient in term of space and count time complexity, but our main requirement is to maintain our space and time complexity. The computer may run out of memory if the recursive functions call are not properly checked. So if we not properly write, not properly checked, not properly accessed, then it may be mm, problematic for our computer also. So there are some part we learned this session about the what is the subprograms, what is the processor for creating any subprograms. These subprograms are how to define like any method by any functions by any subprograms procedures. So these are the follow our topic discussions. But after that we just know about the recursion method, how can it help in our programming for complex website designing, website. You just know what the key features of any principles, any programming languages is, but it's not writing any code to need to explain this kind of scenario. When we use in C++, there are some kind of other technology, other features we follow, but we require to know what kind of features may be having by these programming languages, how we follow that. So this subject only brief about these kind of techniques, these kind of times, these type of rules, regulations, principles are guiding us to help our programming best way. So if you have any kind of like one person say that any unit are showing on the LMS, it required to read. Yes, obviously, why we providing this stuff on the LMS? We provide this stuff for your learning. This session also in recorded form. So if anybody is miss this session in any, it is not just part of the attendance, but you require to learn all these kind of concept in after this session also. So we provide all kind of material on LMS. So please check, or all these members, please rename your with your enrollment or any relative names. So I conclude this session. If you have any point to know which I'm missing or you don't understand, so you can raise hand or type in chat, please. Please type your query if you have. Otherwise, we will ending this session now. You all know everything. Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you. I am concluding this session now. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है आज के सेशन में जो कि दिस इज ओनली जरूर रिमार्क में वो लिखना है जो आपको एक्चुअली जो समझ में आ रहा है कि हाउ वी इम्प्रूव दिस सेशन एंड कहाँ लेक ऑफ कर रहे हैं, कुछ रिक्वायरमेंट आपको कुछ एक्स्ट्रा लग रही है, तो यू कैन फॉलो दिस फीडबैक फॉर्म एंड राइटिंग योर ओन what you feel for these lectures, how these are concluding, how you are engaging with you and all. So that, okay. So now I am ending this session.